So we finally got some good news regarding Xbox Activision deal. Let's look into this. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So after weeks of negativity surrounding Xbox Activision deal, we finally got some potential good news. And that good news is the fact that apparently Sony is in talks with Microsoft over Call of Duty, right? So the whole exclusivity and the fact that CMA, FTC are afraid that Call of Duty after acquisition could become an Xbox PC exclusive. That's what these talks are all about, right? Because I'm sure you remember that Microsoft did promise, not necessarily on paper, but like they spoke about it a couple of times, that they are willing to agree to a deal with PlayStation, with Sony, with Steam, and they even offered that the same deal to Nintendo. They offered them 10 years deal where basically that would guarantee Call of Duty on all these platforms. So no Xbox exclusivity when it comes to Call of Duty, basically, right? And I'm sure you all are guys aware that Call of Duty exclusivity, potential exclusivity, is a huge issue when it comes to the FTC, CMA, and EU investigation, right? So, CMA is actually really afraid of, and FTC really the same. They don't want to leave PlayStation without Call of Duty because, they think it's their opinion that would actually leave Sony and PlayStation at a big disadvantage, right? And looks like Microsoft is willing to work with Sony and all these platforms and stuff. And so if they are in talks with Sony over that, that could potentially mean a good news when it comes to the final decision of FTC and CMA and or European Union, right? And because so far we haven't really we have not seen EU talk about that deal in detail. I think they did that phase one kind of investigation, and they decided they need to investigate more. And I think Microsoft has been recently with talks with them. There were some hearings. I think same goes for CMA. I think CMA is supposed to announce something on 21st, or maybe these hearings are supposed to be at that time. I don't know. Either way, like just the fact alone that Sony, after months of not willing to talk about it really, because like this is not a case where Sony has been in talks with Microsoft over that for last couple of months. No, they were not. Apparently Microsoft did send them like a draft contract, and they did offer them that contract like many months ago. But Sony basically said, you will leave Call of Duty on PlayStation forever or no deal. So Microsoft cannot promise them Call of Duty forever, right? Because they don't even know if Call of Duty will be a franchise like 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? Who knows? And so they cannot promise them a game if potentially 20 years from now the Call of Duty will not exist as a new product, right? Who knows? You don't really know what's going to happen in 20 years, for example, right? So they cannot promise that. But the talks were not continued. It's really difficult to call them even a talks. But looks like there's hard evidence now that Sony flew over to Seattle in United States from Japan to talk about Call of Duty. And if this is the case, that means that either Sony is more open towards that deal for whatever reason. Maybe they were forced, maybe they were not forced, who knows. But either way, if they are in talks with Microsoft over Call of Duty, that could potentially mean that they know something, and they may be aware that, whether they like it or not, that deal may be going through anyway, with some concessions or not. and it's time to start talking with Microsoft about Call of Duty, because they will own it. Because like, let's think about it logically. I mean, would you talk? Would you have any conversation about a product if you knew that this product is not going to be theirs? Of course not, right? So listen, if this deal goes through, I'm talking about the talks over Call of Duty between Sony and Microsoft. If they will come to some sort of agreement, the deal could potentially go through quite quickly, because both CMA and FTC, I'm sure that European Commission probably to some degree as well, they were all using Sony's opinions on the whole deal, right? So if Sony signs a deal with Microsoft, there's no problem there, right? I mean, if Microsoft is able to promise them, and obviously on paper, that hey, Call of Duty is going to be on PlayStation for next 10 years or whatever, right? I mean, there's no deal, right? There's no problem there. So yeah, I see that as a potentially good news. That obviously doesn't necessarily mean that automatically that the whole deal blockade goes away, because that still has to go through steps and stuff. But if Microsoft will go to court or will go back to CMA and waive that contract to them and say, look, Sony did agree to that agreement, so what the hell are you still complaining about? Like, they won't have any arguments against that deal, right? So I think that's the big point. And to be honest with you, like, this is it would be I would love this deal to kind of finish finally, because all what we have been hearing about like Xbox is just this deal, and everyone just is focusing. It's like whenever you hear Xbox, you think Activision Blizzard deal, right? Because like there's no other news, there's nothing else happening around Xbox. It's just that particular Xbox Activision deal, right? And I mean, listen, at the end of the day, this deal is good for gamers, especially if Call of Duty was to stay on other platforms anyway. So PlayStation guys don't lose Call of Duty. I mean, yeah, I get it. Like, they will lose probably access to some other Activision Blizzard games, potentially. I'm sure they will, some of them at least. But I still think that like these big, huge multiplayer games like Overwatch, when it comes to Blizzard, they will probably stay on on all these platforms anyway, because it kind of makes sense, right? If anything, when it comes to like games becoming exclusive to Xbox, we're probably going to be talking about like new games, totally new games that have not been published yet, right? I mean, Diablo is coming to PlayStation anyway, so potentially Diablo 5 could be an exclusive, like what, 7-8 years from now, right? So but when it comes to Xbox PC gamers, like we won't have to actually pay full price for these games will all be in Game Pass. And Phil Spencer did say that they really want to put most Activision Blizzard games in Game Pass anyway. They usually say most because sometimes there may be some technical issues or licensing issues, who knows, especially with those older titles. But I would expect like Call of Duty games and stuff. Oh, one more thing really I wanted to say is that if that deal goes through, don't expect all Call of Duty games in Game Pass straight away. Because remember, PlayStation still have that marketing deal, and I'm sure they will not allow all their PlayStation marketed games to be on Game Pass. So don't expect the latest Call of Duty games on Game Pass for a while. That's just my opinion, right? But who knows? Maybe they will make some sort of agreement, but I don't think that will happen. So once the Sony Activision marketing deal finishes, which is probably next year, then we will see these gains, but not before that. So yeah, just last word on that. So guys, good news, really good to hear something positive, really. And yeah, so thanks a lot for tuning in. Thanks for support, I really appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.